Namaste. Welcome to a new Paradigm of Education podcast. I'm your host, Monique Sayers. Today we have our very special guest, Marieke Calhoven, and I hope I've got your name correct. She can always correct me later. Welcome.
Thank you. That was great pronunciation, actually.
Oh, good. So I'll just introduce Marieke a little bit. She's a parent of a little 5-year-old son. They're living in Bali. She's an Ayurveda and Tantra teacher. And she's also leading different women's retreats and different energy work within Bali, which we'll be hearing about as well. So what I really loved about what I saw in you in relation to a new paradigm is to be able to understand some principles around Ayurveda and how we can apply these for our children and even for ourselves as, parents or people, humanity, because the paradigm shift we're moving from, as everybody knows, is this old function or dysfunction of schools where it operates from 9 to 5 and there's sort of this rigid structure. And I feel like, the new paradigm is already birthing before our eyes. We're seeing all these amazing different people gathering. And so part of this podcast is gathering with all different people in their gifts, whatever their offering is for humanity and for our children. And so that's why I've asked you to come along today, just to share that gift with us. And I feel really grateful for that. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me because, I really love your perspective on education and this new paradigm. And for me, learning about Ayurveda was really something that changed the way I see the world. I felt like someone gave me the key to the universe, and I suddenly had a whole new understanding of myself and everything around me. And also now, like being a mom, being able to apply some of those principles to my life really makes me more compassionate in a way and more understanding of what's actually going on than being rigid around how things should be, because we're all so very different. So maybe it's good if I share a little introduction of what Ayurveda actually is, because I'm not sure if all your listeners actually know about this science.
No, I'd love to hear that. We have a wide range of people listening. Everybody's learning about how to shift themselves in the paradigm. So it'd be great to start with that, definitely.
Yeah. So Ayurveda, it's the sister science of yoga. And Ayur, it means life. And Veda, it means to see or to know. So it's the science of life, to basically really understand life. And the way Ayurveda sees life, Ayurveda looks at life from an energetic perspective, that everything is energy, everything that's manifested in this world eventually comes down, it's energy, and that energy has specific qualities. So in order to talk about something that you cannot see, you need certain concepts. So Ayurveda uses the elements. So we have 5 elements: earth, fire, water, air, and ether, or space. And those 5 elements, they all have different energetic qualities. And we, with our Western mind, we like to think about, for example, water as the H2O molecule, that comes out of the tap. That's water. And Ayurveda says, yes, that's true. But we're not talking about the substance, we're talking about the energetics behind it. So water, for example, has certain characteristics. So it will always move down, for example, it will never go up. Water, if it can't go down any further, it will start to spread. Water also absorbs, it takes something in. If you throw something in the water and you leave it there for long enough, it will start to dissolve. Even really hard surfaces like stone, if water moves over stone, it slowly carves out its way. So water has an absorbing quality. By nature, it's also cool, unless there's an external source that warms it up, but by nature, it's cool. So those qualities, cool, moving down, absorbing, spreading, those are the energetic qualities of the energy of water. So all those 5 elements, they all have different energetic qualities. And we as human beings, we all have those qualities inside of us, and they rule different parts of our being, of our mind, of our body, functions in our body. But at the same time, we also have a unique energetic blueprint. And in Ayurveda, we call that your dosha. So your dosha basically says what elements are more dominant in your energetic blueprint and which are less there. So if you start to understand that energetic blueprint of yourself, or of your children, of your parents, of your partner, there will be a law of nature in how they will behave, because water will always move like water. There's no way that water will start to move like fire, you know, and earth will always be earth. We can tap into our other potentials, but there's a nature to how we move through life. So Ayurveda really wants you to have a certain understanding of yourself, like the core of who you are. And then you can relate from that place to the world, because everything that you take in also has energetic qualities, from the food that you eat to the music that you listen to, the relationships that you have, the way you move through your day. Everything has a certain quality. And Ayurveda is often seen as something that has a lot of rules, or something that just has to do with food. And for me, Ayurveda has to do about life, everything in life. And if you have that energetic understanding of yourself and of the world around you, you will be able to assess what is going to be your medicine and what is going to be your poison. Because, for example, just to give you a very simple example, if I am a person that has more fire energy in my energetic blueprint, and I am very busy at work, and it's summertime, and in the middle of the day, I need a break. And I'm like, okay, I need a break. I go to the gym. I'm going to do my high intensity workout that gets me out of my head into my body. And then I'm going for lunch with a friend, and we're going to meet in my favorite Thai restaurant, and I'm going to order a curry. So I've been moving through my day like that. And then I come back home and I get into a huge argument with my partner. Then Ayurveda would say, well, I could have predicted that, because you're a fiery person and you're under stress, which increases that fire. There's more pressure, and it's summer. And what's the quality of summer? There's more heat. So the heat starts to build, and then you're going to do an activity, an exercise that is high intensity training that creates more heat in the system. And then I'm going to eat food, a Thai curry that's spicy, that creates more heat. So the heat starts to build, and you do nothing to balance that. What direction does fire have? It always goes up, and it goes out. And what energetic quality does it have? It's sharp. So it goes up and out, and it's sharp, right? So if you would be someone with a little bit of knowledge about Ayurveda, you would acknowledge like, hey, I already have a lot of fire. I'm under stress. It's summer, and I need a break from work right now. So instead of doing a high intensity training, it might be better to go for a slow walk somewhere in a park with nature, with trees, which is green, which is cooling you down, or to go for a swim if it's the middle of the day and you really want to move. And instead of ordering that Thai curry, you might go for a refreshing salad. You know, then the outcome energetically of the day when you come home would be very different. So that's a very like simple way to say how everything influences everything. And it's really about that energetic understanding. Once you have that, you will really, there's nobody else that has to tell you like, this is right for you, or this is going to be your medicine. Because we live in a time where it's very confusing to know what is the right thing to do. Even if you look at diet, you know, keto, paleo, raw food, vegan, no carbs, like they all claim to be like the best for your health. And Ayurveda would always say, it depends. Like nothing is right or wrong in itself. Things just have energetic qualities. And are those qualities going to benefit you in this moment or not? And that might change with the times, that might change with the seasons, that might change with our age. You know, with food, for example, I live in Bali right now, and I love to have a big bowl of fresh fruit for breakfast here. However, I just came from Europe to see my family in the Netherlands, where it's winter and cold and snowy and windy. My mind still loves the idea of having a big bowl of fresh fruit for breakfast. But if I would have that there, it would not support my constitution, because I have a lot of air. I don't have much fire. I don't have much heat internally. If I eat juicy fruits, that are very light, that are cooling, in winter in Holland, I'm going to be cold. I'm going to be like an airhead. I'm not going to feel grounded, and I'm going to be scattered mentally because I haven't grounded myself properly through food. So a better breakfast there would be something warming and grounding, like a porridge with some almonds in it. And if I would have the same breakfast here, I would be sweating, I would be heavy and hot. So that doesn't mean that the fruit is bad or the porridge is bad. It just depends on time, place, and circumstance. And we all, because we're all different, we might all need different things at different times to take in our medicine. So if you are a parent or an educator, it's really interesting to have a bit of understanding about the energetics, because you'll be able to manage your day in a certain way. You'll be able to manage your own energy in a certain way, and you will start to recognize those energetic qualities in the people around you. So you might know that one child needs something very different than the other child simply because of their energetic blueprints. And then it becomes really interesting to play with.
Can I ask you more about that? Maybe you could see my mind
Yeah.
was a bit curious about that, applying it to our children. Of course, I totally agree with you as an educator. And as a parent, that looking after myself is definitely like paramount. And in the book we wrote in the New Paradigm, it's all about that. It's all about, well, let's first of all ground ourselves, change ourselves, and be there to be able to be there to support the children who are already so ready for us to be doing that. So how did you know, like, or how do you know what kind of principles apply to your own child? Like, how do you know if they're a fire child or an air child? And I know that might sound stereotypical because I'm still learning what you're talking about, but how do you know what qualities that you can help them with? Is there like a chart or some kind of studying that you needed to do, or like to apply it for people to use, if that makes sense?
Yeah, of course. So there's a lot of like different tests, for example, that you could do online that can give you a glimpse. They're called dosha tests. And I can share a link with you that you can add to this podcast so people can do a test for their child. But it's also very, if you just go back to basics and you think about for yourself about the energetic qualities of those 5 different elements that I said, how do you recognize those? Like, how would you recognize a child that has more earth? Well, earth, if you think of sense, is earth mobile or is it more like stable? It's more stable. So a child that has a lot more earth is not going to be the most spontaneous one that goes from one to the other. And it's not going to be the child that does well with quick changes, simply because their nature doesn't move fast. Another thing of earth is it's cool. So it's slow and it's cool. So they don't get heated up quickly. They don't get agitated quickly. They also don't get enthusiastic quickly. But once they're in it, they can go on for a long time because they don't get disturbed easily. Like air has very different qualities. Air is very mobile, can go in all directions, you know. It will be a child that's very spontaneous and easy to be enthusiastic about basically anything. But it will also be a child that is a lot less, for a child that's much more difficult to be focused on one thing, because they will be easily distracted because they don't have the density that they stick with something for a longer time. So they're usually people that are more creative. They're people that are like open-minded. They can easily switch from one to the other. But it will also be people that have a tendency to be less grounded or get more anxiety, for example, easily, simply because they don't have that connection to core so much as someone that has more earth, that's more stable. Someone that has more fire, a child that has more fire, you can often see it in the eyes, like the eyes that are really fiery, enthusiastic, open eyes, is kids that are direct. They like to go for goals. They have a purpose. They know how things should be done. You know, they are often much more structured because they have a plan and they like things to go according to plan. They can be quite stubborn as well. It's their way or the highway a little bit. And if it doesn't go to plan, like if fire builds up, there's a tendency to explode, to get more angry or agitated. So if you see that happening in a child, that there's a lot of agitation building up, you know that there is more fire in that child. So if you see that happening, and you see when you start to see the buildup, you can pause and say, hey, okay, we need a break here. Big exhale. Let's do something that brings you back into your body, that brings the energy back down before we move into something else. So it's really about starting to see those energetic qualities in the basics, like not make it more complicated than it is.
Yeah, that's really amazing and really, really insightful. And do you notice that over time, I mean, I know energy's fluid and energy's always moving, like energy's always present, it's never still. So does that mean therefore I can change from fire to water, and can the child be changing constantly as well? Like, or is there a sort of thing based off their dosha, like that's kind of more how they're created? I don't know how to explain it in other words than
Yeah,
that.
I understand what you mean, and that's a very good question. So
Yeah.
in Ayurveda, we basically have two ways to look at it. So the way, like, we have an innate constitution, the way we are born, like our astrology and our innate constitution, that will never change. Like, we're born with a specific bone structure. We can become obese, we can become skinny, but that structure will never change. So that's our base constitution, and we call that our prakriti. Now then, as you say, energy is fluid and it's constantly in motion, and we move through life, and we will move away from our core constitution. Like I said in an example, like if you move through a period where you're very stressed, for sure your fire element or your air element will start to increase. Or if you're going through a period of sadness or you're depressed, well, your your earth energy is going to be a lot more increased. So you move away from your core constitution, and that's kind of how we move through life. We come back to ourselves and we move away from that. And like, what's not our core constitution but who we are in the present moment, we call that our vikruti. And basically Ayurveda says the difference between those two, that's your imbalance. And what often happens is that we're out of balance for a long time, and then we start to think that imbalance, that is actually who we are, which is not the case. So in an Ayurvedic consultation, the practitioner will always with you try to find what is your baseline and where are you now, and what is the difference, and what are practices that we can do to bring you back to your core self, to your nature self. So yeah, you can go through phases in life where you have different imbalances. So different things will be your medicine. And even like the seasons, we're constantly influenced by everything around us. So in summer, you will need different things than in winter. And already if you look at sleep, for example, for a lot of us that happens naturally, or for food, you're drawn to different types of food in summer than in winter. Simply because if we're in tune, we are drawn to the things that are our medicine. What sometimes happens is we're creatures of habit, right? So for example, with breakfast, we have a breakfast, we really love that breakfast, and no matter if it's summer or winter or how we're feeling, we're having the same breakfast. So Ayurveda really wants you to become aware of the now. Like, how are you feeling today? Who are you today? And what do you actually need today? Because it might be different from yesterday. And it might be different from tomorrow. So the more present you can be with yourself and with the fluctuations that are there, the better choices you'll be able to make.
I really resonate with what you're saying, and even the breakfast thing, because I have a cacao addiction, which probably isn't the best thing to share on the Ayurveda process.
Well,
but
again, it depends.
It depends on my constitution, but I think for me it's just my little happy sharing.
Yeah.
No, what I wanted to ask you was, like, that's amazing you shared to me like some practices. So, for our children, do you have anything like that you do, like, I guess for yourself, to center yourself? Maybe we want to know a little bit about that. And then also for our children, what do you do to kind of guide them in that way of them? I mean, I know we can role model, but is there any other processes you do to kind of guide them through, or do you just allow them to be, and you're kind of weaving with them?
Yeah.
You know what I'm asking you? It's like, because we're in a new
Yeah.
paradigm, so I'm not trying to control the situation, but what I want to know is just some useful things that we could take as wisdom that we might be able to share and use together.
Yeah, for sure. So For most children, it works really well to have a certain type of routine that they kind of know what's coming. However, again, like they're fluctuating like we are. So for me, it's very much about observing where they are. And there are, like, for example, we can talk a little bit about that. Like there are certain times in the day where certain energies are more present. So if you know your child and you know their constitution a little bit, you will be able to predict what will happen if you don't pay attention. And the same is for something like traveling. Like traveling brings all of us a little bit out of balance. So traveling really increases the vata dosha, which means there's a lot more air energy, a lot more movement. So if I know my child has been either busy at school, or we have been traveling, or there has been a lot of inconsistency, those are three things that really increase the air elements. Then I know, okay, in order for that not to go out of balance, I need to bring in more earthy practices. So we're going to have a slow day at home. I'm going to cook a lentil soup or like a nice little stew that's grounding. I'm going to put him in a warm bath to like bring some heat in his system and some water elements, and slow things down before that will go out of balance. And another thing that you see very often is during the day. So there's something like it's called an Ayurvedic clock. And that means that during different times during the day, different elements are more dominant, and it's connected to the sun. So in the morning, basically from 6 to 10, it's where the sun starts to rise, but we are mostly earth at that time. Earth element is most dominant in the atmosphere. So that means slow, it means stable. So if you have a child that has more earth elements as their dosha, as their constitution, for that child, it will be really difficult to be quick in the morning because they already have a slower constitution. Plus we're in kapha time of the day. So if that's your child, make sure that you have space for that child to be slow. Like take it easy and wake up slowly instead of thinking he needs to sleep as long as possible and then chop, 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 we need to rush, because that doesn't go well with that type of child, you know, simply because of the time of the day and the accumulation of the energy. On the other hand, if your child is more vata, has more air, they will probably feel really good in the morning and they're happy and they're most stable, right? So then the sun starts to rise, and around 10, the energy of the sun is more dominant. So we move into pitta time, into fire time. So between 10 and 2, it's where the energy naturally is the highest. Like we're productive, we're out there, we're doing things, we have a lot of energy. So if your child is a fiery child, you have the chance that at that point, like around 1 or 2, they will burn themselves out and they get to the point where they get like overheated and things are getting too intense. So if you know that, you know you have to be mindful with that intensity, or mindful with being in the sun at that time of the day. And then we move, like the sun, after 2, the sun starts to go down again, and we move into vata time of the day. So vata is ruled by the air element. And you can see that really well when kids come out of school. They're a little bit all over the place, like energy is going everywhere. They're a little bit scattered. They're not very grounded. So children that have more air element already, they will more prone to being out of balance then. So it's a really good thing for that time for kids that have more fire or air to slow down, to have like a quiet moment when they come home from school, to ground themselves and make sure that their energy doesn't build up to go all over the place. And then you have a tantrum at dinner, you know? So to build a little bit of space there to bring that energy back in. And then we move from 6 to 10 in the evening, we move back into kapha time, back into stability, into earth. It will help us to prepare to sleep. Now, kids that have more that vata tendency, more air, if you don't take time to bring them down before they go to bed, they will have trouble to fall asleep because there's just too much energy moving up. They might have a lot of thoughts in their head. It's hard to come back into their bodies. So for those kids, it's much more important to have an evening ritual that brings them down and slows them down and helps them to sleep and helps to calm that energy. Then for a kapha child, an earth child that has more earth, they will not have problems with falling asleep because they are happy in that time. They need help in the morning to get going, you know. So those are just like simple things to look at the day, like what energies are present and what does your child need. And one thing that's, if there's something like a rule, I would say it's really, really important that in the middle of the day, there is a proper meal. Because if you don't take care of your digestion, if you don't take care of your food intake at the middle of the day, in the middle of the day, your digestion is the strongest. So your fire burns the highest internally. So it's the best time to digest. If you don't take that time to have a proper, you sit down and have a proper meal during Vata time between 2 and 6, you'll be all over the place. And for us, it's the same, but for kids, it's even more. So really prioritize having a solid, big meal at lunchtime and sit down and have food all together to prevent you from going out of balance later in the day.
Yeah, wow, that's so helpful. And I was just, as you were sharing that, just kind of feeling into what I believe would be my energy in relation to my daughter. And I feel like I'm very much on air, like I'm waking up and I'm like, off we go. And I know in astrology wise, I'm a double air sign and a fire sign. And my daughter is born a water sign. I need to check the other part of her chart, but she's very slow in the mornings and needs that time. And I'm always like, come on, let's go. So I already know that that's already something within myself that I internally need to work on to be at balance and be of service to her. But the good thing for her is the schools here are just 4 hours and it's just the afternoons, so she can have her proper meal. Yeah, and she goes to a beautiful Montessori school, so she's really cared for. We take her there and it's just a couple of hours and we're back. And if she doesn't want to go that day, that's okay as well. And I really admire families for whatever choices they make with their schooling, whether they're at home and they decide to homeschool, they decide to unschool, or even if they decide to keep going in the mainstream schools, to apply what you're saying even to the mainstream schools, like to be able to pack these proper grounded foods for lunch rather than, packets of chips or these kind of high foods, like really stable foods, and to even create a morning routine of that kind of stability that you're talking about, even if they do need to rush out by 8, to sort of have that grounded moment, maybe without the distractions of the TV, just to ground in together before going off. I think that's really applicable for all different kinds of families,
Yeah, exactly. So that would be super helpful if you understand those energies to create rituals around that. And also for us as parents, what you're sharing, that you have a different constitution or a different energy in the morning than your daughter. Like often what we try to do is to make people behave the same way as we do, or we think that our way is the best way, so then we can get agitated that it's not going fast enough, or the other way around, like you're slow and you get agitated that someone is trying to push you. Like instead of thinking like, come on, you can do better, it's really the understanding of, hey, your energy is just moving in a different way and it's your nature and you're beautiful the way it is. So how can we accommodate that so you can move through the day in a way that is nourishing and good for you?
It's beautiful. And I just got directed to ask you a completely different question. It's around the moon time for teens. I just had this download of, she would know this answer. So teenage girls, what would you help the parents to inspire them to understand about their cycles when they're first developing and things like that? Is there any ways you could help them in that way?
Yeah, I mean, also our cycle, it is a cycle. So our energy is different during different phases of our cycle. So I think it would be great if parents can educate their children a little bit about how the energies move. So first of all, like there's a movement that's the same no matter of what constitutional type you are, right? So we have our phase of menstruation, which is where our energy is lower, where we have more a desire to turn inwards. and nourish ourselves before we go back into the world. And then there's the phase like pre-ovulation, where our energy starts to build. Like ovulation is kind of the peak. And at the peak of ovulation, that's when we're flying. That's when we have the most energy. That's where we are on our top. And then slowly, it's like the summer, you know, and then slowly we go through autumn as we're approaching our moon time. And then we're in the middle of winter where we rest and we go in. So I think it's really important for parents to also encourage to rest during the time, during moon time. And of course, like, you're a teenager, so you're out and about and you also have a lot of energy, but that it's okay to slow down, and it is okay to take some time for yourself. And then depending on what your energetic constitution is, you might run into different issues as a teenage girl. So for example, if you're a teenage girl that has a lot of fire, that has more pitta dosha, you might get a lot more acne if your fire is high, because that's the way how if there's an imbalance in fire, it often expresses through the skin. So if you're a parent and you have a daughter in teenage that has acne and is really not happy with that going through her teenage years, it's a good idea to look into other ways to decrease the fire energy in her life in general. And that can be through foods, that can be through scheduling, like how busy are the days, what foods is she taking in, and can you decrease that fire element a little bit to help her take off the edges on her body adjusting to all those hormones moving through. If you have a teenage daughter that has more air, that's more dominant in air, we call that vata dosha, she might have a lot of cramps around like moon time, because there's a lot more dryness and pain that can be involved. And same thing, like, okay, so how can you decrease that element of movement or not being grounded? So that's very much about incorporating more grounding foods, slowing down, like, are there grounding practices that you can do, and let her rest a little bit more. For girls that have more kapha tendencies, so more earth, they can feel very lethargic around their moon time, really low energy. So what's often really beneficial for them is in the first 14 days, or like your first 5 days you rest, but then move, like have practices to move your body, because it's usually the people that have the least appetite for exercise. They need a little extra push, but they will feel so much better. Their energy levels will be so much better when there's a consistent movement routine. And it's really important for that to be something that they actually enjoy. So it might not be like basketball or something more explosive, but it can be something like dance or swimming or something that has more a creative flavor to it. So really encourage them to find something that they actually like. Yeah, if that makes sense. I don't know if that really answers your question.
No, it's perfect. It's really powerful. I just keep getting more and more downloads of what else to ask you, and information just by us connecting together. We're sharing our energy, which is also going out to the collective field of the new paradigm. And I'm just receiving all this more information about things and, you know, ideas and wisdom that would be really beneficial. Like, I feel like in schools, I mean, if we even call them schools, whatever we want to call them, this form of learning, like, I just think it's really empowering that we can have this kind of sacred wisdom around the moon cycle be sort of taught to children in a way, because it's kind of at the moment hidden by a lot of people in society. It's not normalized. And I think there's a way of us being able to, you know, even like in terms of sexuality, and I know that you're into Tantra and all of this practice, to be able to bring that in a beautiful way for our teens, and then also even for our children, the elements that you're talking about, like the elements of the earth and all of this, kind of to be taught like a toolkit for children to just understand what they're experiencing the world anyway, right? They've got all this schema and they're just experiencing the world. They don't need labels. But at the same time, you know, if a teacher is going to be giving them these labels from a science book, wouldn't it be nicer to have like a new way of educating them? You know what I'm asking you? Like, there's so many, there's all these bits of wisdom that could become a whole new curriculum, you know?
And that's why I really like Ayurveda, because it has this energetic approach, and you can really apply that to everything in life. It doesn't matter. And I really agree with you that especially for women, like there's so little education around how we work energetically and also what is valued in society. If you look at like the corporate world, like women are not giving a day off when they start their moon time. Like women are not are kind of criticized if they even express, and even expressing that is not really valued. Like, hey, I'm on my moon, I'm taking it easy the next couple of days. Like that is not, it's not appreciated, because the masculine values are appreciated and honored, and that's what you gets you high paying jobs, to be in that energy. So it's also about re-evaluating as a society, like what do we actually value and how do we want to build our society. And we're equal, but we're not the same, men and women. We have very different energetic blueprints and different things that fill us up. So that's why I'm really passionate about the world of energy in general, because it just gives you a framework to look at things and an understanding of how the world works. And that's what I would love for our educational system, to have more understanding of energy. And you can call it Ayurveda, you can use the Ayurvedic lens, but eventually energy is energy, and energy has certain qualities. And you can apply that to Tantra, which is much more about polarity, like the masculine and the feminine, or the yin and the yang. It's just different words, but eventually for the same thing. And that's what I try to teach my little boy, is not about right or wrong, but how do things feel to you? Why do you think people behave a certain way? Or why does nature move in cycles? To get an understanding of the energy. And then they will start to apply that themselves. So yes, to an educational system where there's more space for that. But first, we as parents and educators need to be aware of that ourselves. And I feel that's very much what's happening right now, that we're as a collective are going through this, you can call it awakening or upgrade or shift, at least, so we can provide that space for our children.
Yeah, it's a total calling of everybody in the world to make that shift in alignment with the earth that's already shifting. Like, and there's no reason to be fighting that. It's like this beautiful flow energy of, okay, I'm just going to flow, and I'm going to birth a change. It's time for that. It's like this calling forth of everybody to be moving in that process of the feminine, it feels like to me. But I don't like to label things, because everything, as you're saying, has different qualities, so.
But you can say yin and yang in a way, then it's less related to like gender for some people. But it's just the opposite qualities. And we come from a paradigm that is very much valuing masculine qualities, which doesn't mean the man as a man and the woman as a woman, but the masculine qualities, which are driven, which are purposeful, which are fast, which are different than feminine qualities, which are more slow, more nurturing, embracing, more watery qualities, while the male qualities are more fiery qualities. And they're both really beautiful. But in order to work together in the most beautiful way, we need both of them. And now there has been much more of the masculine qualities in the world, and we're slowly shifting towards the more feminine qualities. And it's not about that the world has to be feminine, no, but there needs to be a balance between both to really birth this new paradigm. Yeah,
it's a total honoring of that space, that sacredness, and that flow energy. Like when I was downloading the wisdom of the new paradigm it just came through my body, and I was like, well, what do I do with this? What am I going to do with this? And it came through as a book and a vision, which is basically an expansion of what's already going on in the world. And I just connected with lots of different educators, and we made the book, and then now we've made the podcast. And what came through all of that is, when we were consciously writing the book, we were using flow energy. So we would use like time off. We would not follow any rules around deadlines of handing in something like, like you do at school. And we would like, I personally would be floating in the ocean, and then I'd come home and write a little. And it's just giving an example because I wanted to be, it just felt true to my essence. If I'm going to be role modeling or downloading this paradigm, I'm also needing to shift into that state of embodiment
Yes.
of myself, to be that space, to be able to create from that space. And it's such a beautiful place to create from. And I really feel like in schools in the past, the old paradigm, there was always this push energy that we were just talking about, 40 minutes, you must write this thing, or, half an hour, you've got to play. That's it. And it's like, it's so constricting and kind of, forcing and pushing, and it doesn't work. Like, learning happens from this place of flow. Learning happens from this place of creation. Sometimes learning is not going to happen so much on these days where they need to rest, like you're saying, like the child just wants to sleep. Okay, sleep that day, that's fine. Tomorrow get up and do something. And I really feel like the more that this is coming through, and it is coming through in so many different ways, then this shift will happen. And then I think it will shift into them as the elders, just that's the normalized state, and then the generations that will be normalized as well. Like, we're just working through that first process, and then it's going to be birthing across, and it's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what I also think is important to emphasize is like, and I feel that in my system too, is because there has been so much structure, which is like the masculine structure in society, in schooling and education. There's this big pull for like freedom and flow, like the complete opposite, like no structure and do what you feel like. And I think it's really good, that energy is really good to break out of the old, but eventually it needs to be integrated, because if there's flow, for example, for me, for a long time, I was like, my highest value is freedom. I just want to flow. I just want to be with whatever my energy is asking me. But I also realized that if there's no container for my energy, I'm a little bit all over the place. And I like the idea of that, but actually in reality, in my life, it's not making me my best life. So it's about, I also actually need a container, even though my mind doesn't like that idea. But the container needs to be flexible and not fixed, because if there's a container that can hold that energy, it also gives freedom to move around in the right space. And I think it's also like that for education. Like, it's not all about structure, but it's either not only about flow, like it's about creating that container that can adapt to what is there. And then you have a beautiful way of those energies working together.
That's perfect. And that's such a beautifully aligned answer. I can see that you're an Ayurveda teacher, because you're bringing so much balance back into this conversation. And it's so perfect. I just love what you're saying. And yes, I 100% agree with you. It's a dance of the energies, placing them back in. And yeah, totally wholeheartedly hear you on that. I wanted to ask you, before we close our beautiful ceremony today, I know that you're working with women and things like that at the moment. So did you want to share something about that, and maybe just tell us what you're up to so we can get a taste of what your offerings are? That would be amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, pre-COVID, I was running a lot of retreats here in Bali. But we have been closed for tourism for over 2 years, and the borders just opened again since last week. So I'm very excited about that. So I'm planning a couple of retreats for July, August, September here in Bali. They will have different focuses. Some will be more Ayurveda oriented, some will be more about feminine embodiment and Tantra, and some will have a combination of that. So that's one way, if you would like to dive deeper, or if this connects with you, to come and experience that here in Bali. If you're not in Bali, but you're interested to dive deeper into Ayurveda, I also offer one-on-one consultations online. And that's where we really dive deep into who are you as a person, like what is your base constitution and what are your imbalances. And we have an honest look at your life, like at the whole of your life, and see what are practices that you can implement that are realistic for our modern life, which I find very important. That will slowly help you shift from imbalance towards balance. So that's a very personalized track. And there's also an option to one-on-one coaching for that. And then I do energy transmissions, which is something very different. We haven't really discussed that in this podcast. That really helps you to awaken your Kundalini energy, which is our spiritual untapped potential that we all have. And once that's manifesting, it really helps you to reach higher levels of consciousness, which will help your spiritual path and your growth and to be living your full potential. So that's something else I offer both in person and online. So yeah, I'm sure you will share my contact details and my website in the bio. So have a look at that, and yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, they are beautiful offerings. I know if I was in Bali, I would definitely come with you and hang out there for sure and meet you online for a healing or just to know more about myself. It sounds, yeah, sounds really powerful. And it's from a service from the divine and from your heart as well, which is the most important aspect. Like it's just something that is your gift, which is the most important aspect of any kind of service that you're giving. So thank you for offering that out to the world. You know, I can really feel that within yourself. And about the energy work, well, actually, that's the final thing I'd like to say is that energy and education, I feel, are completely aligned. Like energy is everywhere and everything. And actually, in our book, A New Paradigm of Education, we talk about the energetic quotient. So we have, you know, there's the IQ that everybody knows about. Then there's the EQ, which is the emotional quotient. And we actually share about the energetic quotient. So it's the additional aspect of the brain that we can tap into that will also help our children to be able to learn in a new way, in a way that's really powerful. We're not saying switch off your IQ or switch off your EQ. They're both important as well, but it's being able to bring in extra parts of wisdom that you have never been able to tap into before. And by doing these kind of energetic downloads as yourself as an educator, or, you know, tapping into meditation or bringing that element into your household, that's really going to help you be able to shift and learn and respond to education in a better way as well, I believe, you know?
Yeah, amazing. That's really well put. And I think that's the way to move forward. And fortunately, I see more and more people being open to that concept, that energy. Like 10 years ago, when I was talking about energy, it was still a little bit woo-woo.
Yes.
But you know, even science says everything is energy and the quantum field is real. And even people who are not on this spiritual path are acknowledging that. And I think that's also something that I really like. I really try to make this wisdom more accessible in a way that it's tangible and in a way that we can relate, instead of the wishy-washy spiritual languaging that for a lot of us is not resonating. So I'm very much about how can we bring this in a down-to-earth way that we can all benefit from this wisdom. And yeah, it's gonna come. Like we're on the path. It's growing, which is great.
Yeah, it's totally, and it's there to serve everybody. It's there to help our children. Like, I really believe the best form of service we can do is to be like the highest good for our child. And, you know, we talk about in the old paradigm of education, a lot of learning difficulties, anxiety, a lot of problems that have come through one style of learning that just wasn't suitable. And now we have access to all of these types of learning. So, you know, what you've shared today is something that we'll be able to tap into, as well as the energetics behind all of that as well. So it's really powerful, and it's totally necessary, and it's happening before our eyes, you know. So
yeah. And the last beautiful thing I find about that is it comes from a place of neutrality. Like we come so much from an era where things are black and white and good or bad, and this is right and this is wrong. But in the energy world, it doesn't exist. Like there's not that duality. Like things just are, and things just have a certain qualities, and all qualities are beautiful, but they're not like, if it's the right thing to do, it depends on time, place, and circumstance. So the better we know how to navigate that and see the circumstances that we're in, we can tap into those different energies that we all have inside of us to bring forth and to balance ourselves in the best way. Yeah.
Yes, I hear you 100% on that. And I was about to share more, and I was like, probably we'll be here for 3 hours because my whole heart just gets so excited when we start to talk about energy.
Amazing.
I can apply it to so many different ways within education. It's like something I feel like I'm gifted to be able to share in some way,
Yeah.
like applying like all this 5D world back into like the 3D world that we're in some way. That's probably how the book was written, actually, like just using both, a balance of both wisdoms. And I know that they're just labels. There's so much more complexity to it, but we'll leave it there for today. And yes, everybody will be able to contact you through the links in the bottom. And it's just been so beautiful to learn about Ayurveda and how we can help our children and our teens and even ourselves. And thank you so much for coming on a new Paradigm of Education podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. And it's also beautiful to see how you light up when you start to talk about energy. I can really see that there's a lot more to come out from you. Maybe another book needs to be written.
Yeah, there's one in the process, actually, now you mention
Oh,
it.
well, there
Yes.
you go.
There's a lot more
Yeah.
coming through me. It's a gift I've been given in the new paradigm, and it's something that's living inside of myself, and I'm sharing with the world to be able to be of service. And it's not something for me, it's for all of us. And you're part of that. Like, our students are part of that, educators are part of that, parents are part of that. It's like all of us together form this. It's nothing to do with me, Monique, sitting here. It's this beautiful formula of everybody standing together and rising into this new paradigm. So
Well,
yeah, thank
beautiful.
you.
You're doing great work. And thank you for having me today.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this conversation.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into a new Paradigm of Education podcast. Namaste.